So sorry we are late. I promise we will make the show worth it. There's a lot to talk about between Sunil and I. We're going to talk about the Achilles heel for the San Francisco 49ers. Can this team win in shootouts? And what the hell is Doug Gottlieb talking about? We're going to talk about that plus more next. All right. Welcome back to Last Second Sports, where we are giving you our take down to the last second. And it's Tuesday night, which means I got my guy, So Real, Sunil, in the building. What's up, Sunil?
Living the dream, man. Wanted to wish a happy holidays, Merry Christmas to the fans out there. Want to thank my guy, Jesse. Bought me this brand new camera. I don't know how it's looking and stuff because I still need to upgrade everything else that I be working with. But I appreciate the sentiment, my guy.
Yeah, absolutely. And you know how we know it's holidays? Because you got the lumberjack red and black pocket and hoodie. That's how we know it's the holidays around here.
Let me peacock this out a little bit, make sure everybody can
Yeah. Make sure we can all see it. That's great. I love it. Yeah. All right, man. Let's get into it. We made them wait long enough. Let's talk about the special teams. It's the forgotten unit. Always the forgotten unit. But as we know, 49er fans, and I hate to rip off this Band-Aid, but we know that special teams can cost you big games. Let's not talk about an NFC championship once upon a time against the New York Giants, right? In your opinion, Sunil, do you believe the special teams is something we should be worrying about in this moment?
I mean, I saw this stat, and it was showing the 49ers offense, 49ers defense, and 49ers special teams. And the offense and defense are both, in like the top 3 to 5. And then special teams is like 24th or something like that. So it's clearly the weakest link. And I think, Jesse, because of some of the major injuries that we've had, have affected specifically special teams. When you look at a guy like George Odom, guys that have been in and out of the lineup, like, Samuel Womack, Luter, these guys are key components to the special teams. And then another gunner that we have, Oren Burks, now he's playing more and more on defense. I mean, he's out right now too, but a lot of the studs that we brought, Ray, actually the 3 studs that we brought in a couple years ago to upgrade the special teams are all out, right? Ray's out, Odom's out, and Oren Burks is out. So we saw, Ronnie Bell, he's not the safest with the ball when it comes to kick returns. And, you mentioned it, the 49ers have lost playoff games due to lack of special teams. We still don't know how much we could trust Jake Moody. So if there is a weakness, the special teams is definitely it, Jesse. And I mean, we're not seeing those wow plays that we used to see earlier in the year when the guys that I mentioned were healthy and playing and things like that. It's definitely, the second string special teams, which tends to be, your third string guys, your guys that are just coming off of the practice squad, trying to make the roster type of thing. So yeah, I mean, the 49ers are so dominant on offense and defense. Unfortunately, we don't see that same dominance in special teams.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, special teams, as you laid out so eloquently, is certainly the weakest unit on this team. And it's not even league average. That being said, I don't know if it's a huge concern, but it's certainly a question mark. Moody's a great example of this. I don't know that I'm concerned about Moody, but I'm not confident in Moody. I don't know that he can make a game-winning kick. I don't know that he can make even kicks throughout the playoffs consistently, because it seems like they go so many weeks without him even having to kick a field goal above 35 yards, right, if ever. There's games that he doesn't kick any field goals, and that's a good thing, because that means the offense is scoring touchdowns. That's great. but there is going to be a time when you're going to need him in the playoffs, maybe in a big moment. And I don't know that he can deliver. So it's not a for sure that he's bad. It's just, I'm not quite sure. And then you talked about Bell. I did have a solution, Sunil, last week that I was talking about. You give me your opinion, but right now we have Deebo Samuel returning kicks. Love that idea. What about Brandon Ayuk, who used to return punts in college? What about him returning punts? How would you feel about that?
I feel like you have very short-term memory because I mentioned this on this show at least 2 weeks ago when Ray went down that Brandon Ayuk should be the kick returner. I absolutely believe that should be the key. I have gotten some pushback on Twitter because I've mentioned it there as well. People are saying that, he's not explosive enough and he has fumble issues and all that. I think that there's some Brandon Ayuk slander when it comes to how explosive he is with the ball in his hand. I don't think he's getting the opportunities like a Deebo gets, like a CMC get, like a Kittle gets to really break tackles because he's already the off the top, the last level when it comes to when he's getting the ball. So there's not much of this like run after the catch type of stuff because he's usually the last one there. But yeah, I think you want to get the ball into your playmakers' hands as much as possible. So I would say Brandon Ayuk if you need to make a play. But for me, it's more about just going back to the old, Trent Taylor days where it's just like fair catch everything. Like it doesn't matter if you have room to run, all that kind of stuff, fair catch it. Because at this point, like they don't need that extra yardage. They just need you to not fumble the ball. So those would be my two options. And I do want to shout out, somebody mentioned the one shining star in the special teams is Money Mitch, right? We got to give
For sure.
Mitch Wishnowsky because he's playing lights out. He's playing at a Pro Bowl level. So he deserves no slander. But the rest of the unit, like you mentioned, maybe we shouldn't be worried about it. But if there is a unit that we are most questioning, it's definitely the special teams.
Yeah, at best, it is a question mark. And do you like how I stole your take and then repackaged it back to you as if it was mine?
And then you try the acting that you're getting good at too, like the pause. It was the hands. It was like, how do you feel? Like you don't even have the glasses, but you had like the whole interview glass. Like, how do you feel? How does this make you feel? What are your thoughts about? I'm like, yo, Jesse get a Hollywood on us real quick, man.
What do you see in this ink blot? Oh my gosh, that's too funny. Sudden Chaos says, I'm a member. Sudden Chaos, thank you so much for becoming a member. Greatly appreciate you. Matthew says, not Ronnie Bell with the strong Kyle Williams vibe.
No, he said
in the number too. It's the number 10. That number, we retire numbers. That number just has to be banned. They have to get rid of it. There's nothing good has come from number 10 as of late. Matthew says, rather add a fake field goal or punt plays than switch returners. Ooh. Yeah, well, I will say this. The fake punt that was, I don't even think it was supposed to be a fake punt, but that's what it turned into with Mitch Wishnowsky. But he's got wheels, man. Maybe he should be the punt returner.
And guess who messed up that play? I know it wasn't his fault because he slipped, but it was a Ronnie Bell penalty that called that play back as well. So, unfortunately, when it rains, it pours, right?
I really like Ronnie Bell, though. I don't want to dump on him too much. As far as a special teamer, maybe not so much. But as far as the future slot receiver, I like him in that role. I think he's going to be very good in that role. I think as a blocker, he's more than willing. I think he's a good blocker. I think he's going to be great after the catch as well. I think he's going to fit perfectly for that role when Jauan Jennings presumably moves on, but I don't know. I like him there. I just don't want to trash on him too much because it definitely seems like we're coming down hard on him. He's just a rookie. He'll be fine. We like him, just maybe not on special teams.
And maybe that's the issue, though, Jesse. Like, how many rookies are we trusting on special teams right now? The kicker's a rookie. The punt returner's a rookie. Like some of these gunners are rookies. Like the team is, a lot of the gunners, a lot of the guys on special teams are rookies. So for something that has caused issues in the past for the 49ers, you are trusting a lot of rookies. So I guess with rookies, there's always going to be those ups and downs. We just hope that we don't see those downs when it comes time for the playoffs.
Knees with a great message says, just another reminder, undefeated since Wilkes went to the sideline. Eagles haven't won since Big Dom left the sidelines. Hashtag sidelines matter.
That's a great take.
That is a very, very solid take by you, Knees. Great job. It is the daily reminder. Okay, let's talk about if special teams is not it, and maybe special teams is it, does this team have an Achilles heel? This team right now is clearly the best team in football. I don't think anybody is debating that at this moment. However, they're not perfect. Do you think this team has an Achilles heel going into the playoffs?
So Achilles heel is kind of strong, and I know I probably brought up this topic, but Achilles heel is, we know in Greek mythology, got the arrow in the Achilles, and that he was like done for of that. I don't know. Don't know if the 49ers have an Achilles heel, because I think they could win in so many ways that they could overcome whatever weaknesses that they do have. But if I am going to pick an Achilles heel, it's interesting enough, man. Interior defensive line depth. And we saw it with the way that Arizona was able to run all over the 49ers. It seems to lead to missed tackles, all these types of things. We started to see a little bit of unwinding of the defense when that defensive line has weaknesses, right? So before it was the edge, they obviously plugged that up with, some of the trades that they made, bringing Randy Gregory in, bringing Chase Young in. But I think they were banking on, these guys, these rookies coming in, like a Beal Jr., Clea Davis. He's not a rookie, but it's his first year playing. Obviously, I think Kinlaw's playing great, but I think they were hoping for a little bit more punch when it came to the interior defensive line from those guys, which is why they didn't really bring somebody in to pad that up. And, with Armstead out, with Hargraves out, it was significant, man. You could tell the difference that those two starters weren't there, and it led to this Arizona offense, I think, looking better than they should against the dominant 49ers defense.
Yeah, most certainly. And I think depth right now is a concern, what is interesting is we felt like the interior defensive line depth was pretty good. And to your point, it was the pass rushers, the edge rushers. Well, they rectified that during the trade deadline, but now the defensive interior line is where the issue is happening. But ultimately, that problem comes back to, Big Heck, I'm going to give you credit, Achilles heel is health. This team in the past has really struggled staying healthy. This year has been probably the best that we've seen in quite a while. That being said, right now, the reason that they're having some depth issues is because of health. They're hurt all the way through the interior of that defensive line. Right now, 3 guys are hurt. We'll see who plays and who doesn't. For sure, Kalia Davis is going to miss some time. He's got a high ankle sprain. We'll see about Armstead and Hargrave. But right now, there is some health concerns with some of those players. And in the past, that has been the Achilles heel. So hopefully they can stay healthy, get healthy, and then stay healthy.
I agree.
Keith Murphy says he wears number 10 like Kyle Williams. Gives me Kyle Williams vibes. Get Ronnie Bell off punt returns. Yeah, I think no matter what, whether they go with the suggestion that Sunil had that I repackaged and gave back to him, or Ray gets healthy, I think either way, he won't be there much longer, but it is a concern with him back there. I mean, it's an adventure. And the last thing you want from a punt returner is an adventure. That is not a great way to describe a punt returner.
I think they have to make a decision on Ray here by like Wednesday. Otherwise, he's gone for the season. I think they have to have their like definitive rosters done this week sometime.
Well, if he's able to come back, then they've got to figure out how to get him onto this roster and make it good. But we'll see. If that's the case, I'd have to look up the rules. I kind of forget every year on these
Yeah, the
So,
only reason why I think is because I know all that Aaron Rodgers stuff was going on, and they were
yeah.
saying that they had to make a decision this week on if he's going to come off of IR or not, because they had to get their 53 man situated by Wednesday. So I think that's probably the same for the whole year, the whole league.
Oh, well, I think that's because they opened his practice window 2 weeks ago. When you open the practice window, you have 3 weeks. That's it to
Gotcha.
activate them. And then after that, it's over. So I think because injuries are going to happen throughout the playoffs too. So I think that you're able to kind of continue to do what you do, bring guys up from the practice squad. But I don't know. I'd have to look into it. Mike says, Jesse, how long before your son is 12 and gets to start his Ravens channel? He's only 9 now, 9.5. So about 2.5 more years. What's crazy is I love the idea. I loved having him on. That being said, I wouldn't have done it. It was my wife that encouraged it, and then he got excited. I was a little bit iffy about bringing my kid onto camera in front of everybody to see. It makes me a little uneasy, but you know what? It is what it is. It happened. I think it was good. Ultimately, he loved it. You guys had great feedback for him, made him smile. So I think it made his day. But one of those things about when he does start his channel, like I got to really consider turning off comments because all it takes is one. And it is the last thing I want is for people on the internet attacking my 12-year-old kid. So, there's some things I got to think through, but that's kind of what I'm thinking about.
And he forever nicknamed Jimmy G from now on. Like, it's Jimmy Granopolo from now on. That's all.
Oh, Jimmy Granopolo forever. Right? Yeah. Nee says, moral of the story, Jimmy G really ruined Jesse's chances of his son being a Niners fan. That's factual. That is factual. So, yeah. I mean, listen, I get hella mean comments, but I'm an adult. I'm a man. I'm 40, literally. And so for me, it's whatever. I don't really care. But for a 12-year-old man, you get one, and that can really, really crush your psyche. So I don't know. There's a lot to think through as a parent. You guys know that are parents. It's not easy to make some of these decisions, but he did great. And I think he would do great at this. He's very, very intelligent, and I'm excited to see what his future is, regardless of what he decides he wants to do. All right, let's talk about this offense. It's interesting because I remember at the beginning of the season thinking, man, this team, actually, this started last season. You and I had these conversations where we talked about and said, this team is starting to turn more into an offensive team. That being said, I still worried about playing the elite quarterback. What happens when they play the elite quarterback? If they're in the playoffs, they get into a shootout. Can this team win in a shootout? Can this team score with a minute left and no timeouts? For me, Sunil, I feel really, really good about this offense where it's at. I feel really, really good about having Brock Purdy at quarterback. Feel really good about all the offensive weapons. This team over the last 2-3 weeks has shown to be more explosive than they have all season. Now, it has been a little bit at the detriment of time of possession, but the 49ers are showing they can win in a multitude of different ways with this offense. I think, for me at least, this question has been answered with a resounding yes. They can win in the shootouts when the playoffs come and they play the elite quarterback. But what is your thought? You agree? You disagree? If you agree, this is like the only time on the show that that's ever going to happen. But
well, it's about time pessimistic Jesse got off of the show, because sheesh. What did you think? My guy Kyle Shanahan wasn't gonna finally find his quarterback, and now we get to see what was unlocked. Look, I have been stating, and I don't want to make this a Kyle Shanahan rant, but the only thing that was holding back Kyle Shanahan from fully unlocking everything in this offense was he didn't have the right quarterback, right? And finally, he has the right quarterback. And whether or not you want to argue, hey, is he elite? Is he a top 5? Is he MVP? Is he just as good as 15 other quarterbacks, like the topic we're going to be mentioning after this? He's perfect for what Kyle Shanahan needs. He processes the game extremely quick. He has a quick and accurate release, And on top of that, he has mobility to gain time to let the routes develop when they need to develop. Mix that with Kyle Shanahan's ability to just like get dudes extremely wide open. Deebo Samuel wide open in the end zone. CMC wide open for a touchdown where he could fall down, get back up, and still score. Like, these are supposedly the two best players on the team on offense, and they're like, nobody's even accounting for them. Insane, right? So yeah, I think for me, my philosophy always, Jesse, is the team that could win the most ways, to me, is the team that I would bet on. And not only can the 49ers win in a multitude of ways, meaning the defense could be the reason why they win, the offense could be the reason why they win, special teams could be the reason why they win. If you just even break it down into the offense itself, they could win on 3 different layers. They could win with the run, they could win with the deep ball, and then they could also win dinking and dunking, right? And to me, that's really, really tough, because whatever you try to take away from a defensive perspective, 49ers not only have one counterpunch, they have multiple counterpunches on how they could switch up their game and still be successful and move the ball down the field. So I'm absolutely confident that no matter, even if Patrick Mahomes' 2019 version of that offense, or the best version of Patrick Mahomes' offense is there, I think that this team could still score, and we still have a top 5 defense that can hold opponents to, under 15 points whenever they want to.
Yeah, I wish I knew how everybody felt in the 2019 run for the 49ers before the playoffs, not after the Minnesota Vikings game, because I think a lot of people were like, oh gosh, what is happening here with Jimmy Garoppolo? But that team was scoring 29.9 points a game. Team was putting up a lot of points. That team did it. Well, I'm going to ask you why. I'm going to ask you why here in a minute. So hold tight on that one. But that team did win a shootout in New Orleans. And New Orleans that year was kind of the favorite in the NFC. And the 49ers went in there after losing to the Ravens, won a shootout in their dome. And that was a big, big deal. Why is it different? And when did we know that it was different? Like, at this point in the season for the 49ers, did we know it was different for the 2019 team then? Or did it take that Minnesota game for people to really wake up to what Jimmy G potentially might be, or his flaws might be?
I think that the offense never looked like this in 2019. Like, they were scoring, that we were winning, but we all knew it was product of the defense and based off of field position, all of those types of things. What the defense was doing was making it easier for the offense to score the way that it is. And outside of that New Orleans game, Jesse, the 49ers offense, if the running game wasn't dominant, the offense didn't look good. And luckily, the running game was ranked number 2 that year. I think they averaged over 140 yards per game. And that was the way we were winning. The 3-headed monster of Coleman, Breida, and Mostert, like, that's where our explosive plays were coming from. Whereas now our explosive plays are coming from everybody and everywhere, right? In 2019, we had nowhere near 4 skill players that were going to have over 1,000 yards in offense. Right now, we're about to have that. Right, we have a running back that's already has 20 touchdowns. Deebo scored, 10 touchdowns, 5 rushing, 5, in the past game. Ayuk has 6 touchdowns, over 1,000 yards. Kittle, so it's like the weapons, everybody wasn't getting fed the way that they're getting fed right now, at the way that they're getting fed. And I think we do kind of know, Jesse, and we know because in 2019, I can't point to a time where the defense was like, we just know if we give them enough opportunities, the offense is going to go for 40 points. We just know if we do our job, the offense is going to score enough points to win the game. We weren't hearing stuff like that. And sometimes, based off of that it wasn't being said. And now it is being said, right? Fred Warner, Nick Bosa, Greenlaw. We've heard all of these guys talk about how this offense is the most dominant offense that they've ever been a part of. And they know if they just like do what they're supposed to do, the offense is going to figure it out and score 30, 40 points. And I think we know how excited they are about that and how it's different, because that's not things that they were saying in 2019.
No, it definitely was not things that they were saying, but I just want to point this out, and I don't disagree, by the way, because I definitely feel different now. But I think when we were in the middle of that ride, we felt really good about this offense too. That's the only point I'm trying to make. Now, in hindsight, we know, and we're like, okay, maybe we shouldn't have felt that great about that offense. But I'm going to go through some of the scores that the 49ers put up that season. 41 points, 51 points, 36 points, 37 points, 48 points, 34 points, 31 points, 31 points, 37 points. This team did put up some points in some of these games. I mean, a 51 spot, a 48 spot. They were scoring now. 48 was against New Orleans. 51 was against the Panthers. 41 against the Bengals. Let's see. 37 against the Packers. 34 against the Rams. 36 against the Cardinals. 37 the second time versus the Packers. So they were scoring some points.
I just think that the fact that they're scoring 30 plus points on the best defenses in the league against the best teams in the league is different from that 2019. Remember, and one thing that we forget, that 2019 year, they had like the easiest schedule when it came to, because I think the year before we were like last place. So we had the last place schedule when it came to our NFL season. And that was one of the things that a lot of people were detracting from the season is, they had a great year, but it was like one of the easiest schedules in the NFL. 49ers don't have one of the easiest schedules this year. They have one of the tougher schedules in the league, and they're still putting up the numbers that they're putting up. They still have the record that they have, and they're still poised to be the number one team in the NFC, possibly the number one team in the league, record-wise, when it's all said and done. To me, level of difficulty still getting the same, if not better results, shows how much better this team is than that 2019 team.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, I do agree. I just want to kind of put myself in that 2019 frame and remember, honestly, did I feel during that time that this offense could hang? And maybe I did. I can't remember. I really can't remember. But I feel like there were times where it was like, oh man, this offense is scoring. And like I said, 29.9 points a game. Now, it did become clear against Minnesota in the playoffs that, oh, this ain't it. This isn't what we thought. But, I don't know.
And also, Jesse, sorry to cut you off. I don't know if you remember that year and every year after that until this year. Remember, I constantly was talking about how the 49ers can't score in the first half, and then they just put the onslaught in the second half.
Mm-hmm.
That's not this team. I haven't said that at all this year. They've been able to score every single quarter. They've been able to score first half, second half. That 2019, if we go back and really break down the box scores, I think a majority of those games, those points all came in the second half, because the first half they couldn't get, they couldn't score in the first quarter. They were scoring at the end of, 2-minute drill at the end of second quarter, tough stuff like that. So even though the numbers at the end might be similar, the way that they're scoring is much easier this time around.
Yeah, definitely. I do agree. I really do agree. Randall says, just wanted to submit my score prediction into the YouTube videos history books so I can rewatch this video next week and smile. 31 San Francisco, 13 Ravens. Ooh, I like it. I like it. Nee says, I found it hilarious. Kyle really took Debo's tendency of lack of full speed when he's not getting the ball and made it a red zone play.
Genius. 40 chess. 40 chess. Great. It wasn't Debo's tendency. It was Kyle Shanahan coaching him up the whole season so he could do that.
Yeah, you know how he shows things all season so he can do it? He's like, Debo, just act like you don't care when the ball's not coming to you. We're gonna make it happen for you. Here's a bonus topic. I love this comment here. Scott says, after a 5-0, the defense clearly wore down and looked slow. Last week in Arizona, after another 5-0 run, the defense looked wore down and slow. I'm concerned. If they play like that, we could easily lose 2 of the next 3. This is a interesting comment. And because I think when you look at the defense last week, it was certainly covered up by the Travarius Ward interceptions, and one was returned for a touchdown. But Arizona spent a lot of time moving the ball with relative ease. Now, of course, interceptions were made and the defense did what they had to do. But this game was very similar to potentially that Minnesota game and that Bengals game, where if the 49ers had lost, everybody would have been freaking out and blaming Wilkes again. Like, what's wrong with your defense? What's going on? So it is an interesting point. I'm not concerned that they're going to necessarily lose 2 of 3, but that was the big thing. And Kyle Shanahan said it himself. This team looks slow going into the bye week. We talked about running off 12 in a row if you don't get the number 1 seed. Now, the good thing is the 49ers essentially have locked up the number 1 seed. So even if they have to play a little sluggish to round out this season, they're going to get that bye week, and that's going to be all that they're going to need to make this final push. So I feel really good about it going into the playoffs, but it is an interesting point here by Scott.
I mean, I agree. I understand, but I also, at the end of when it's all said and done, I think that Arizona only scored 22 points, something like that. In those games where we had the 3-game losing streak, yeah, the defense wasn't lights out like they had been, but I think there's a little bit more understanding of why it was this time around. I don't know. They weren't worn down. I think they were worn down because they had to play completely different because 2 of their big pieces on the interior line were out. And I think that did confuse the linebackers a little bit because they were missing tackles that they usually don't miss. And I also think it put Fred Warner at a disadvantage when it came to the linebacker, Trey McBride, who had a big game against them because he had to make up for the lack of rushing defense from that interior line. And I think that affected his ability to cover the way he usually would because I'm sure the trust that he has in the guys that were there is much different than the trust that he has in Armstead and Hargrave. And I wonder if that affected the way that he played because this was the worst game that Fred Warner had. Let's be honest. He missed tackles. Obviously Trey McBride had a big game, and usually he's the guy that's guarding the linebacker or the tight end and stuff like that. So I think it's just an adjustment. But I also think that these guys are focused enough to where they could fix it, and they're going up against the team that they know is a measuring stick. It's not like a game that they're going to overlook. Let's just put it that way.
No, they're definitely not going to overlook it, but I also think that we felt very confident they weren't going to overlook the Vikings after losing to the Browns, or certainly they weren't going to overlook the Bengals after losing 2 straight, and they just didn't have it. I think here's another thing to point out. So Arizona only averages 18.5 points per game. They scored 29. Now, some of that did come in garbage time. I understand that. Even if we take 7 away, they scored over their average. Since the bye week, the 49ers defense has given up 3 points, 14 points, 6 points, 19 points to the Eagles, 16 points, and then this one out of nowhere was the most they'd given up to any team, and it was against a team in the Arizona Cardinals that only averages 18.5 points a game. I see Scott's point. I also see your point that a lot of that had to do with injury, and this team is about as focused as they can be. And then also rounding it out, my point is it's okay. They have the bye week coming up for the playoffs. I think they're going to be just fine.
And the defensive line is different too, right? That Chase Young wasn't on the team. Randy Gregory wasn't fully engrossed in the team. Those 2 guys have been game changers when it comes to how well this defensive line is looking. So it's a different team from the one that went on that 3-game losing streak. And even though they look slow, even though they didn't play their best ball, they got a win out of it. And that wasn't happening before because the offense was actually not clicking on all cylinders. So luckily, this team can win on all different levels. So even if the defense isn't as dominant, the offense is, so they can make up for it.
Yeah, most certainly. Somebody said, what was it with Kyler? So let's see. They scored 29 with Kyler. They had scored 25, 16, 14, and 24. So that was the most points that they've scored even with Kyler. So there we go. The more you know. And Matt brings up a great point. He says, when your best run defender is missing, it isn't an excuse. It's a reason. It's fair. It's fair. Cryptic says, with the Seahawks and Rams fighting for the playoff spots and final week being the same 2021 scenario, but in reverse, could a division end our season? PS? What's PS?
Could a division end our season postseason?
I don't know.
Yeah, I don't understand.
Maybe he's talking about the bye week. Either way, if
Positioning?
oh yeah, end of season position. Yeah, I don't know. Let's take it as yes. If they lose, could that take away the number one seed? I definitely think the Rams are a live dog for sure. I don't think that the 49ers, if they need that game for the number one seed, are going to lose that game. So Matt says, win the next 2 games and have 2 weeks off. I hear what you're saying, Matt. I disagree with taking 2 weeks off, though. I don't think there's a rest and then there's rust. And to me, 2 weeks off is rust. If they get the bye week, which it looks like they're going to get the bye week, they would have to lose 2 games. Dallas and or the Eagles would have to win out. It's just not very likely at this point. It's looking like the 49ers are going to get the bye week. I think the 49ers really need to play their starters in that final week to stay kind of active and into it because they are going to get the bye week. That's just my personal opinion.
I mean, I think to maybe what Matt's saying, 2 weeks off, like the guys that are injured, you could sit them, right? But everybody that's healthy should play, like you mentioned, at least, 2 or 3 quarters just to make sure that everything's clicking on all cylinders. But definitely, I mean, guys with nagging injuries, things like that, if let them sit, you know what I mean? Like if we don't need it type of thing.
Yeah, most certainly. All right, let's get into Doug Gottlieb. Doug Gottlieb had some interesting comments. He basically said that when it comes to the MVP award, he feels like there are 15 quarterbacks that can do what Brock Purdy's doing, that the team would win just as much with 15 quarterbacks in his place. He said that much like we do with LeBron James, where people say, oh, look at how great he is for 39. They always have to throw in the caveat that he's 39 years old, that people are doing that for Brock. It's like, oh, look at how great he is because he was the last pick in the draft. And so for him, he's just looking at it player for player. He thinks that there's 15 quarterbacks that can do in this offense what he's done. What are your thoughts about this comment from Mr. Doug Gottlieb? To be fair, I also want to say, and he said it multiple times, thinks it's a good story, thinks he's a good quarterback. He just doesn't think he deserves to be the MVP. Take it away, Sunil.
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of this is stuff that's clearly out of the team's control, right? These narratives are in the media. Obviously, the 49ers are the best team in the league right now. They're one of the most historic franchises in the NFL. And it's great because our fan base is all over all over the US and people are interested. You talk about Brock Purdy, you're going to get clicks. Are there 15 quarterbacks that can do exactly what Brock Purdy does? To me, that's being spoken to for somebody that hasn't watched the 49ers play. That's just watching highlights. That's just piggybacking on what other people are saying. Because if you watch the film and you see, like we've watched every single one of the 49ers games, whether it be on TV or live, right? And there's not 15 quarterbacks that can do what Brock Purdy does. His processing is elite. His accuracy is elite. His mobility is elite. These are three things that I can't say that there's 15 quarterbacks that do that better than him. Now, he will always be taken with a grain of salt because of the roster that's around him. And we will never know how to answer those questions, Jesse, until the day where he doesn't have all of those guys, or those guys aren't playing at the level that they're playing right now, right? And hopefully we never have to have that question answered, because honestly, I like the team the way that it is. Let's just keep this for as long as we can, right? But ultimately, to me, he can't be like, hey, Debo, I need you to sit out so that I could prove that I could win without you. Hey, CMC, I need you to sit out so I could prove how, like, that's not what is he supposed to do? He's, with what he has around him, he is not just middle of the pack, Jesse. He's not just top 10. He's not top 7. He's not top 5. He's either number 1 or number 2 in every single major quarterback category. So to me, you can't just always handicap him because the talent that's around him. Because, yeah, maybe that would raise somebody who's 15 to like 10, or somebody who's 20 to like top 12. But he's number 1 and number 2 in every single category. So to me, that just means that he's probably closer to, if you're handicapping him, he's still going to be a top 10 quarterback in my books. And you always mention, if you have a top 7 quarterback, the team will look a certain way. To me, I think you could make the argument that Brock Purdy's a top 7 quarterback because of the way this offense and this team is looking.
Well, what you can argue is that he's certainly playing like a top 7 quarterback, regardless of what he ends up being long-term or whatever. And that's all that we've ever wanted, is that kind of play, and they're getting it. And it should be enough to win a Super Bowl this year. It's definitely been enough to put him into the driver's seat for the Super Bowl. What's interesting about all of these takes when it comes to Brock Purdy is a lot of people are looking at that 3-game stretch and saying, he didn't have Trent Williams, didn't have Debo, and see how bad it looked. This is what he's going to be. Now, coming from a guy who, my reservations are still the same. Nothing has changed on my front, which is, I was always more worried about the long term. Can he be a franchise quarterback? When he's paid and the talent stripped away, people have heard me say this a million times, and the talent stripped away, is he going to be worth it? That has been my only concern with Brock. Now, somehow that's turned into, I don't like Brock. I didn't think they could win with Brock this year. You're a hater. You didn't think he was good. All these things. And I never said any of those things. In fact, I said the opposite of those things. But essentially, what the reason that I bring that up here is to say, even myself, who is concerned long-term, potentially, that he's going to get paid and may not be the right answer when weapons start getting stripped away, I'm not going to use 3 games in his first year as a full-time starter and say, there it is. All the stuff that I was concerned about, that's it. I'm right. I'm not going to say that I'm right based off of those 3 games. I'm going to need to see it for a season without the weapons before I'm going to say, okay, this is what it is and this is what it is. And as far as being a franchise quarterback goes. So to look at those 3 games, much like we talked about Jake Moody earlier, Jake Moody's looked shaky at times, but because they go long stretches without having to kick field goals or long field goals, I'm not saying he can't do it or won't perform in the playoffs if that situation arises. I'm just saying I want to know. I want to see it. People are taking an unknown, using a 3-game stretch, and then writing the narrative as if it is so. And you can't do that. It is way too early in his career to say that's what it's going to be. So it's funny because I have a lot of the same reservations that some of these other guys may have. But what I'm not going to do is write his story off of 3 games. And what I'm also not going to do is say, hey, he doesn't deserve to be in the MVP conversation. I personally would give it to CMC, but if I didn't give it to CMC, I'd give it to Brock Purdy, which means he deserves to be in the conversation. He has earned his spot to be in the conversation. And as of right now, regardless of what he becomes long term, is he elite long term? Time will tell. He's playing elite in this moment, and that should not and cannot be taken away from Brock Purdy. That is my opinion on it.
Do you think there's 15 quarterbacks in the NFL right now that you'd rather have had than Purdy?
God, I'd have to go through it. 15 that I would absolutely rather have. Are we talking? See, so many questions go into this. We have to lay out the parameters. Are we talking? Does his salary matter? Are we talking for the next 5 years, or are we talking for one season? Are we talking for right now?
Player for player, without all of those extras.
Okay, so player for player.
So obviously, Patrick, for sure. Right?
Hold on. Before we get into it, so player for player, money doesn't matter, and we're not talking 5 years from now. We're talking about if everybody's healthy right now, we can afford them player for player. Would you take him over Brock Purdy? Is that what you're saying?
15 quarterbacks in the league right now that if they were on this version of the 49ers, this offense would look just as good, if not better, than what Purdy's doing.
I can't say that. No, I can't. 15's a lot, bro. 15's a lot. Here's what I will say. And I don't want to get into the rankings, and there's so many hypotheticals. But here's what I will say, Sunil. Do you believe Nick Mullins is a backup in this league or a starter?
Backup.
Okay. Do you think at times, even without all the weapons, because there was a lot of injuries when he played, just being in this offense, that he looked like he could be a low-end starter in this league?
Yes.
Okay. Is Jimmy Garoppolo a low-end starter in this league or a backup, in your opinion?
At this point, I would say a backup.
Okay. Were there times that he looked like he was a top 12 quarterback in this system with these weapons?
Yes.
Okay. So does it stand to reason that if a clear backup quarterback in Nick Mullins can look like a low-level starter in this offense without a lot of those elite weapons, just being in this offense, and that Jimmy Garoppolo, who I think he's a low-end starter. I actually think he's a low-end starter. I think that there's not a lot of great quarterback play in the NFL. Regardless, low-end starter, fringe backup, whatever. If he in this offense could look like a top 12 guy, does it stand to reason that even if Brock Purdy is, say, the 15th best quarterback in the league, and I'm not saying he is, I'm just saying that if he is, that maybe he could look like a top 3 quarterback in the league with these weapons in this offense, if everybody else is getting that kind of boost from it?
I would say the key term that you said was sometimes. Whereas I think this whole season, Brock Purdy has looked like an MVP caliber player.
Was Jimmy Garoppolo not viewed as a top 12 quarterback in 2019?
Not every single game. Maybe from the outside looking in, but not us. We knew Jimmy Garoppolo was throwing interceptions when we were like, oh, we knew.
Hold on. When
Exactly.
you say we, you're talking about us. I don't
people
think
that watch the games.
I don't think this fan base collectively looked at it that way. I really genuinely did. In fact, I know they didn't, because even in 2021, when I started content creation, I was having arguments then that he wasn't that guy and people thought he was. So I think in 2019, mostly everybody in this fan base thought he was a top 12 quarterback. They did, and the stats would have supported it.
Right, but he never looked like a top 3 quarterback.
I agree, but we're talking about you just called him a backup quarterback, looked like a top 12 guy. What I'm saying is, if you take an average starting quarterback.
We're also comparing now Jimmy G versus 2019 Jimmy G, right? So that's what we're talking about, 4 or 5 years. So I'm sure the 2019 version of Jimmy G, I would say, is a top 15, 18 quarterback.
Jimmy Garoppolo just last year, 4 games with Christian McCaffrey, had a 110 quarterback rating and averaged over 250 yards passing with no turnovers in a 4-game stretch. the same Jimmy Garoppolo that was benched on the Raiders this year and is clearly not the best quarterback on that team, that probably doesn't have their future quarterback. Listen, I'm not saying what Brock Purdy is or what he isn't. I'm not saying he's not a top 10 quarterback, I don't know. Long term, we will find out. All I'm saying is it does stand to reason that if those guys can look much better than what they are and look that elevated in this offense with these weapons, that maybe that could be happening to Brock Purdy too. Not saying it is. I'm just saying that it could be. That's it. Hater. Brother Bob says, "Yo, Nails, Sunil, say anything stupid yet?" No, he didn't.
So you gotta watch the show, Brother Bob.
That's a teaser.
Notes.
That's a teaser. Black Kiza says Purdy's MVP case, similar stats to Peyton in 2003, MVP year, will break the 49ers records in yards and touchdowns and will eventually eclipse the 94 team record for 505 points. He then continues and says, CMC's numbers are similar to 2003 Priest Holmes, 27 touchdowns, 1,420 rushing yards, 690 receiving yards, finished fourth in MVP voting. He's making the case for MVP. I hear your case. If Purdy wins the MVP, I think it's deserved that he wins the MVP. I do. Cryptic says, didn't Kurt Warner have a roster? Have a roster. Manning, hold on.
I think he's making the case. So didn't Kurt Warner have a roster? Manning, Breeze as well. Why the doubt with Purdy with media? For me, the only player that did more with less is Brady.
I think Patrick Mahomes last year won an MVP and won a Super Bowl and a Super Bowl MVP with a lot less. But either way, you're talking about Tom Brady, who's arguably the greatest quarterback of all time, and Patrick Mahomes, who, for all intents and purposes, is going to go down as a top 5 quarterback of all time, if not the best. So it doesn't happen very often. I hear your point. Yes.
And I mean, ultimately, the difference between Jimmy and Mullins and Purdy's only a second-year guy. Exactly. We're not saying like that the question mark is there is, I think, fair. I think there's certain people that maybe already see what they need to see as far as not just what he's doing with the talent that he has, but the fact that he's able to do it. You know what I mean? Because not even though Jimmy had a great 4-game series with this team, it never looked the way that Brock Purdy has made this offense look. So to me, I think that I'm a guy that if I'm putting money on, is Brock Purdy closer to a top 10 quarterback or a bottom or a top 20 quarterback, my money would be on a top 10 quarterback. I think he has elite qualities that will transfer even if there wasn't as great of talent there. And I also think that next year he's going to look just as good, if not better, because I think this offensive line is going to get better next year through the draft. So he's going to have 1 or 2 years, Jesse, with all the talent and maybe even better talent around him next season. So regardless of what we believe, he's going to get paid like one because he's going to look like it for 2 years. And this team is going to do very, very well in those 2-year period as long as he stays healthy.
I hope Brock Purdy gets all the money in the world. Playing for the contract that he has played for, can't get paid until after 3 years. He's going to deserve whatever it is he wants. And if he wins the MVP, and there's a great chance that he is going to win the MVP, and if he does, he deserves the award, man, he's going to be able to take whatever he wants. Now, will he give the discount? Who knows? But he deserves to get paid. He is more than outplayed his contract. All it took was one. If he had came in against Miami, finished that game, looked the way that he did, and then never played again, he already outplayed the contract. He already outplayed expectation of being a Mr. Irrelevant, right? Like, so everything that he's done since is just compiling on the fact that he is criminally underpaid. So when it comes time to get paid, I hope he gets every bit of money that he can get. I really do. Matt says Brock is better because of his weapons. Weapons are better because of Brock. I've said it before. Symbiotic relationship. What's up, Maddox? Well, Maddox is in bed. I will tell him you said what's up. But I agree. We were having a conversation earlier, Ryan and I, and we did our show, and somebody said, CMC wouldn't look like this if Brock wasn't here. I said, yeah, maybe. You might be right about that. But, maybe Brock doesn't look like this without CMC. But what I do know is this team had both, and they still lost 3 games. So they can be making each other better. Yes, Brock can be making CMC look better. CMC can be making Brock look better. I'm totally fine with that. I think that it can be both. I don't think it has to be one or the other. I don't.
And they're doing something historically, like we said, Jesse. I think we mentioned it last week or earlier this show. I think it hasn't been since 2002 or something like that, where there's been 4 skill players that are above 1,000 yards from scrimmage on the same offense. And this team is going to do that by the end of the year. So I don't think just any quarterback can lead an offense and have those type of numbers. So there is something to be said that Brock Purdy is elevating the play of everybody around him. And I'm sure he looks a lot better because of the players he has around him as well, which is props to this front office for putting the team together, because isn't that what you want? Like, that's what you want to have happen, so that the team is looking the way. Ultimately, all of these individual awards aren't what's important. The Super Bowl is what's important, and this team is primed to win one. They look like the favorites, and they look like the only reason why they will lose is if they choose to lose.
Well, brother Bob, from your keyboard to Sunil's lips to God's ears, you guys agreed. He also doesn't give a crap about the MVP. Just win the damn Super Bowl. You guys are on the same page with that. Absolutely. Jimmy says Brock is elite when it comes to processing the information in front of him and taking the correct action. He's making it look easy when we all know 15 others cannot do what he does. I agree that 15 others can't do what he does. I think where Doug is coming from potentially is that it doesn't have to look the same, and this team could still be a 14-win team with 15 other quarterbacks. It was really his point. He talked about the winning side of things more so than anything. It doesn't have to look the same. There are things that other quarterbacks do that Brock can't do either. So you put in Josh Allen or Patrick Mahomes in here. Well, let's say that they can't process the way that he does. So maybe it doesn't look the same, but maybe there are throws and plays that they can make that he can't. So although it doesn't look the same, the result is relatively the same, is ultimately what he's getting at. Now, I disagree. I got to imagine I would struggle to find even 12, but, that's his take, not mine. I'm not going to defend his take fully, but it doesn't have to look exactly the same is all I'm saying. Juan says, sure, other QBs can win with our roster. Okay, so you agree. But how many do we believe can win a Super Bowl? I believe Brock can win the bowl for us. I agree with you. I think Brock can win the Super Bowl. And again, these are all hypotheticals. These are opinions. Nobody's opinion is right or wrong. And fortunately, or unfortunately, I guess, however you want to look at it, we're not going to see 15 other quarterbacks suit up for this team and go out there and try to win a Super Bowl.
Knock on wood.
You've only got Brock. So hopefully they just win a Super Bowl, and that's that, right?
Knock on wood, bro. Because this team, if any team is going to suit up for 15 quarterbacks,
it's going to be this one.
So knock on wood.
All right. Fair. Brother Bob says this system has made CMC and Mostert 20 touchdown running backs. For sure. And Mostert's incredible. CMC's incredible. And we've seen them both in this system. Black Keys says, in my humble opinion, top 10 combo should be reserved for guys that have been doing it for X amount of years. A good or great season should be left at that. I agree with you. I think it's completely okay to say this season, Brock Purdy was a top 10 quarterback or whatever you want to say he was. Top 5, I don't care. Wherever you want to put him. that then doesn't mean that that's who he always is. There's always shuffling of the top 10. Every year, if you took the top 10 quarterbacks for that year, it's always different. It's always different. Sometimes, Patrick Mahomes has been the best. Sometimes Tom Brady's been the best. Sometimes Burrow's been the second best. Sometimes Allen's been the second best. Hell, Kyler Murray was a top 10 quarterback for a season. Kirk Cousins has been in there multiple times. Some people think Jimmy was in there in 2012. Some people think Carr's been in there. Some people think Dak's been in there. The point is that it's constantly shifting. You have to prove it for multiple years before you're cemented in that conversation. But right now, what Brock Purdy is doing is he's playing fantastic football. This team is the best team in football. They are the favorite to win the Super Bowl, and he's the favorite to win the MVP. And you can't do anything but take your hat off to him and applaud him and hope that this team continues to win. That's all we're worried about right now. But I agree with your point. Cryptic says, can Brock be the first Niners to make the Madden? Oh, God. Do we want that, Cryptic? Is that actually what we want? I don't think that we want the Madden curse. Yeah. That's one thing that we can probably all agree on.
CMC
we don't want the Madden curse.
Brock, to be honest.
How about no 49er? Can we get no 49er? No 49er. Just saying. All right, let's get in to this Fred Warner topic. Fred Warner was on the Pat McAfee show, and he had a ton to talk about. Why don't you talk about some of your takeaways from that interview of his, Sunil?
I mean, I don't really have any kind of like eye-opening stuff, because I think if you listen to Fred Warner and what he talks about, like, he's pretty consistent with what he says. It just seems like he's extremely comfortable in his role. I think some of the things that I really took away from the interview was the culture that this team has, how focused this team is, and ultimately that these guys enjoy playing ball together, and that there's a standard, which we heard a lot in a lot of these post-game interviews, but the standard is all the way through from the coaching staff to the players. And I think one thing that maybe stood out to me the most, and he tried to walk it back a little bit, Jesse, but he mentioned how his relationship with Wilks, how he feels like he's being heard when he gives his feedback about what's going on. He said like it's like the first time that he felt like people are listening to him, and then he's like, not that DeMeco and Salah didn't, but I really believe that what Wilks is doing is something that might be a lot more underrated than what I think a lot of the fan base, and I could be the first to say, I've been highly critical of Wilks, but I think he's done an amazing job to get it together as quick as he has, because he came in, he didn't bring in any of his own guys, which, I think we took for granted. Like, that's not normal to keep all the staff that you didn't hire yourself and so on and so forth. He, learned the 49ers system instead of tried to teach the 49ers his system. And I guess there's going to be a learning curve with that. And, when it's all said and done, it looks like the defense loves Wilks, and it seems like Fred Warner and Wilks have a really great relationship. So I think for me, the biggest things that I took away from it was how much this coaching staff, the players love them, man. And I think that they do an extremely great job, and they're always talking about watching tape and getting better and all that type of stuff. And I think that's just a hats off to Lynch, Shanahan, Wilks, and the whole coaching staff, because from a fan's perspective, this being one of the big leaders on the team, that's exactly what you want to hear from your leader when you want to have confidence in this team is ready to win a Super Bowl.
It is interesting because when Wilks was hired, that was a lot of the talk was, hey, Fangio wanted to do his thing. I'm sure he's set in his ways. There's no way that he was going to acquiesce to the system that the 49ers run. He wants to do what he wants to do. And that was the thought. We presumed that was the case, but now we know that that's the case as far as Steve Wilks. He was willing to acquiesce, learn this system and run it, But with that does come some growing pains. And it did start out fantastic for 5 games. And then there was 3 interesting ones in there. Now, not all of that was on the defense, but it got a little squirrely. Overall, though, it has been fantastic. I loved hearing him say exactly what you had brought up, which was, hey, Steve Wilks is a guy that I can come to and have a conversation with. And I know he's listening. Some people act like they're listening. Some people act like they care. He shows me he genuinely cares. And you can feel those things. You know when somebody genuinely is listening and when they're not. So that was great to hear. Also, going back to the conversation about the shootouts, and you did bring this up during that conversation, but Fred Warner talked about in this interview how confident they are in the offense. Like, hey, just as a defense, we just got to go out and execute. And as long as we do a decent job, we know that this offense is going to take care of business and win us games. That is not how we've always felt. We do feel that way right now, which is great. And what I also love is the perfection or pursuit of it. He talked about how upset he was and this team was when they just came off of a dominating win against the Arizona Cardinals, but they gave up as many rushing yards as they did. It was frustrating for him. And it's something where they want to fix the little things, because if you don't fix the little things, they snowball into bigger things. So even when it looks good on film and everybody else from the outside looking in is like, you're great, you're great, you're great, they're looking at it and saying, no, we have things to fix. And Debo, by the way, echoed the same exact sentiments about the offense. I believe it was today in one of his interviews. They both talked very similarly, saying, hey, there's little tweaks that we can make to make things better. And we're constantly trying to do that. This team is not at all satisfied. If anybody was worried that they got a fat belly, they're feeling themselves, or that they were earlier in the season, and that's why the 3-game skid happened, it's not happening now at the most important time. This team is poised, locked, and ready to make a Super Bowl run. And I love everything that I'm hearing from them.
Yeah, and I think another big thing, Jesse, was how much he used the word effort. And he mentioned how the way that they separate themselves from other teams is they do all of those little things that other teams don't consistently do. They try to do that consistently every single play. Like everybody gets, wherever the ball is, everybody has to show that effort there. Blocking, everybody blocks the way that they need to block. Like all of those little things is what they're focused on. And to me, once again, I got to go back to the coaching. Like that's something that's being instilled in them. You know what I mean? And I think this, and maybe it's prisoner of the moment, Jesse, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, but to me, this has been the most everybody's saying the same thing. Everybody's on the same page, and not from like a scripted persona, but like genuinely, it seems like everybody believes and is on the same page, which to me, like I said, is once again, it bodes well for a fan base that's waiting for a team to win a Super Bowl. I think we're hearing all the right things that gets us excited and confident that it's possible this year.
Yeah, we definitely are, and it feels great. It feels great to be a 49er fan right now. Matt says, I pray for the day no more Brock discourse talk. Brother, this is the way it's always going to be. I mean, we can say that and think that it's going to happen, but listen to how some people in here talk about guys like Dak Prescott and Jalen Hurts, and well, Jalen Hurts not so much, but Dak Prescott, Josh Allen, hell, even Patrick Mahomes right now is all of a sudden not as good as what people thought he was. We're talking about a guy who has multiple MVPs, multiple Super Bowl rings, is only about 6 years into his career, and now all of a sudden he's not as good as what people thought he was. People are always going to talk. If you're not doing it right now in this moment, if he's not an MVP candidate next year and he's the 10th best quarterback or whatever, people will be like, oh, wow, geez, he really fell off. I mean, maybe he's not as good as what we thought. It's always going to be there. You always have to perform at an elite level. And the moment you don't, you're not as good. Tom Brady, when he was leaving the Patriots, people thought he was washed. Well, they were wrong. He was still arguably the best quarterback in the league. And because of the things around him that were happening, people couldn't see that. So this conversation around quarterbacks in particular, not just Brock, is one that is going to happen daily, weekly, yearly, everything. It's a constant conversation. So
the only way Brock Purdy
Happening.
doesn't get talked about is the same way Trey Lance isn't being talked about now. Shipped away from the team.
yeah,
Like, that's the only way you could stop the Trey Lance Brock Purdy discourse. Is one of them had to go. Trey's gone. We don't talk about Trey anymore. So
yeah.
if you don't want to,
And Brock Purdy's going to be here for the long haul. It sounds like, right? I mean, there's no reason not to pay him. It's not like he's just going to fall completely off next year. That's not going to happen. So, yeah, I mean, he's going to get paid, and if he ever has a down couple game stretch or a down year, you're going to hear about it. It's just the way it works. Kaliki says, I think it's great that the fan base rallies behind one quarterback. Brock's going to ball and silence the critics. Deep throw equals Seattle game, etc. Yeah, I think that is the biggest thing is, listen, regardless of opinions, I've said this a million times, but I'll say it again because I think it's appropriate. As a fan, you have one rule. The rule is to root for the product on the field when the games are played. And no matter what your opinions are, if you're not rooting like hell for Brock Purdy and every other player on this team when those games are being played, well, maybe you're not a fan. So that's what we all should be doing. We all should be happy that this team's in the position, and we all should be rooting like hell for Brock on Sundays or Mondays or Saturdays or Thursdays or whenever the hell they play football nowadays. Brother Bob says, Kittle said CMC should win the MVP. Do we kill him?
Only if you're going to kill Purdy, because he said the same thing.
Yeah. Listen, they're all going to vouch for each other. It's just the way that it is. I was called a moron for saying that I would have CMC as the MVP, but when Kittle and Shanahan said it, I guess they're super smart because they play and coach football. I don't know the difference nowadays, but either way, no, you shouldn't kill him. Matt McEwen says, should have clarified from our fan base.
Still won't happen.
It's never going to end.
Man.
It's never going to end, man. Same answer. Good clarification, but it's never going to end. It's just the way that it is. All right. Listen, y'all. Appreciate you. We just went over an hour. Those of you that were here in the beginning, thank you so much for waiting through the technical difficulties. Sunil, as always, thank you for joining me on Tuesdays. You can wish them a Merry Christmas. You're not going to see them before then, so you can wish them Happy Holidays. I'm going to see you tomorrow. You guys have to see this ugly face at least a couple more times this week before you get a Happy Holidays from me. But Sunil, you can sign off.
Yeah, I want to sign off. I'm going to be at the Ravens game, 49ers-Ravens game this Monday night. So if any of you guys are at the game and you see me, please say what's up. It would be nice to meet, any of you guys that are over there. I'm going to be out there tailgating, all that kind of good stuff. So hopefully we get to see a lot of you guys out there, and hopefully we come back with the big dub on a big Monday night game. But Merry Christmas to everybody. Happy holidays. And, we'll see each other when we see each other.
Peace.